Hey guys, this is Mrs. Harbin, and this is Algebra 1. We are looking at section 3.4, the percent equation. This is probably one of the most useful and used equations that you are going to use throughout your life. We use it to determine sales. We use it to determine taxes. We use it to determine commission. We use it to determine tips. We use this percent equation a lot. So it's really important that you understand this equation by the time we are finished. Our biblical correlation for this unit comes from Colossians 3:23, which says, "Whatsoever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for men." And we've been talking about how we have been entrusted with the care of creation and care of other people. That's part of God's creation. And so that when we're learning how to do all of this math stuff, it's not just for math, but it's so that we can use our skills to go out and take care of creation and take care of other people. And because we're being entrusted with this responsibility, we do need to make sure that we're actually doing our best to learn it and not just surviving or staying awake in math class. Our lesson objective for today is that you, the student, will apply the percent formula to find the part, percent, or whole, and use the formula to solve real-life application problems. So let's take a look at some definitions. A percent is a special kind of ratio, and it's a ratio of a number to 100. So we have, ratios like 3 out of 4 or 7 out of 8, and percents are just like those, only percents are always out of 100. So 25 out of 100 is 25%. Okay, remember that cent means 100. And per just means a part of, so this is a part of 100. It's a ratio of a number to 100. Percents can be written with the percent symbol, which you are probably familiar with, as fractions like we see up here, 25 out of 100, or as decimals, because these are parts of 100. Those are hundredths, and our hundredths place is right here, 2 decimal places. So 25 out of 100, or 25 hundredths, or 25% looks like that as a decimal. Okay, 82% can be written as 82 over 100, which can be reduced to 41 over 50 as a fraction, and as a decimal is written as 0.82, 82 hundredths. Let's try changing some fractions to percents. So we have 3 out of 5. The first thing that I like to do is actually change this to a fraction with 100 as a denominator. I like taking that step. So I know to get to 100, I'm going to have to multiply 5 times 20, and whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So 3 times 20 is 60. So 3/5 is the same as 60 100ths. You can also do this on your calculator and just take 3 divided by 5 to give you a decimal. 3 divided by 5 will come up as 0.6 or 0.60 when you do that on your calculator. That tells me that 3/5 is 60 over 100, or 60%. If we convert it to a decimal first, then what we do to turn it into percent form is multiply that decimal by 100, and that changes it to a whole number here that's represented as a percent, 60%. Again, I like to change it to a fraction that has 100 as the denominator first, and from there write it as a decimal and a percent. Let's try converting this decimal to a percent. The decimal is 1.55. To change it to a percent, we multiply it by 100, and that gives us 155%. Writing that as a fraction, we're going to write 155 over 100. Percents always have 100 as their denominator, so it looks like this. And then we don't want to leave it that way. We can simplify it and reduce that down to 31 over 20. Let's try to fill in this chart. Right? If we're told that the decimal is 0.25, think about what that would look like as a fraction and as a percent. Try that on your own. Pause the video. Come back when you think you've got this chart completed. So 25% as a fraction is 25 over 100, which we can reduce to 1/4. Think about that. That makes sense. 25 out of 100 cents, well, that's a quarter, and we know that 4 quarters make up $1, so if you only have 25 cents, you have 1 out of 4 quarters, or 1/4. As a percent, that's written as 25 and then the percent symbol. Now the next one, 2/3, is a bit tricky. because it is a decimal that repeats, 0.6666666 repeating. So if we were to get that to a close percentage, we might say 60%, but technically what we should write here is 66.6% repeating. That's more precise than this 60%. Again, we can take 2 divided by 3, and that would tell us what our decimal is. Multiply that by 100 to get our percent. Okay, working backwards, let's start with the percent. As a decimal, we know that that is 0.8 or 0.80. And if we were to write that as a fraction, we might write 80 over 100, which would then reduce to 4 over 5. Now let's talk about the percent equation. This is the useful part of percents. This is what we're going to use for taxes and tips and commission and everything like sales involving any kind of percent. So the percent equation says this: the percent of the whole is equal to the part. Let's translate this into math. Hopefully by now you know that of means times and is means equals. And then we're going to represent these things here with variables, since we don't know what they are just yet. So we might write it like this: the percent times the whole equals the part. Maybe we want to use a variable or symbol, so percent times the whole equals P for part, or maybe PT for part. You decide what variable you would like to use there. So what percent of 85 is 60? Percent times the whole is the part. So let's write our equation here and then plug in what we know. We don't know the percent, so we're going to leave that as a variable. We know the whole is 85, and we know the part is 17. From here, we're just going to solve for our variable. Divide both sides by 85, and we get P equals 17 over 85. When we change that into a decimal, again on your calculator, take 17 divided by 85, and that changes it into a decimal for us, 0.2. To change that to percent, we multiply that by 100, so that becomes 20%. 20% of 85 is 17. What is 45% of 236? Well, here we know the percent, and we know the whole. What we don't know is the part. So let's take that equation and plug in what we know. When you don't know the part, in this case they represented it with R, is our equal sign. 45% as a decimal is 0.45 of, we're going to do some multiplication here, and 236. When we plug that into our calculator, we should get that the part is 106.2. That should be logical. We want to go back and check to make sure our answer is logical. 45% is almost 50. And by looking at this, we should be able to figure out that 50% is 118. Should be a little bit less than 118, which it is. All right, 78% is 78 is 130% of what number? Let's plug in what we know. 78 is 130% of what number? Notice this is not 0.130. 0.130 would be 13%. So this is 100% plus another 30 hundredths. So 100% and 30 hundredths times our whole number. If we divide this by 100, it would move our decimal place over 2, and that's where we get that 1.3. Solving for W for our whole number, we find out that our whole number is 60. That 78 is 130% of 60. All right, let's try some more real-world problems. Miss Grandy received 17,490 of the 31,800 votes cast in the election. What percent of the votes did Miss Grandy receive? Well, let's think about our equation again. Percent of the whole equals the part. Percent of the whole equals the part. We don't know percent, but we do know the whole number of votes, and we do know what part she received. So let's plug in what we know. What percent of 31,800 is 17,490, which as a math equation looks like this. Percent times our whole number is 17,490. From here, we use what we know about algebra to solve for P, and we find out that P is 0.55, which translates to 55%. That's what the question asked. So 55% of the votes. So, did she win by majority rules? Yes, she won the election by majority rules. So today we applied the percent formula to find the part, percent, or whole, and we used the formula to solve real-life application problems. If you have any questions, be sure to ask me next class.